Okay, well guys, welcome back to the channel. I've been away for quite a while between working on my truck
Crazy.
and reminding my sheep on a daily basis that they are sheep.
You are a lamb. I know sometimes you may forget that. You should always try your best to maintain a sheepish vibe about you, okay? You're doing a great job, okay? You just keep doing the sheep thing.
I've been quite busy. So, what we're going to look at today, we've got a video here. What is God made of? Now, if you guys follow the channel, you know the title of the channel is The Desert Spring, which, of course, if you'd like to come on and share your story about how you've left Christianity, please, you can go right up here to my email, desertspring111@gmail.com, and I'd love to have you on the show. We can talk about your process of walking away from Christianity, how you dealt with some of the feelings and emotions and things like that, the direction you took and all that. So please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please interact with the video. These videos go absolutely nowhere if we don't get likes and subscribes and comments and stuff like that. Even if you don't put anything significant in the comment section below, if you just throw something in there, if you do support the channel, that does help kind of spread everything around, and the YouTube algorithm spreads this information to more people and helps everybody kind of, you know, we're all trying to heal from Christianity is really what it comes down to. But I'm not atheist. My opinion is just simply that there is an intelligent something, and it can't necessarily be defined. And that's basically my stance. I do think that there is, I wouldn't say an intelligent design. I think it is, both complicated and simple, which is why I say all the time, if we wanted to define God, it would take two books. One that was so infinitely, complicated that it couldn't fit on this damn planet, and another one that was just simply empty. I really do think that it is within everything. And we're going to get the Christian perspective on that. So today, what is God made of, from the Catholic Bible Highlights? So this is going to be an interesting one. I don't know how long this is going to be because this is a 30-minute video, I want to say is what it is. And so we're just going to have to see kind of how it pans out. But all right, let's get into it.
Does modern science have anything at all to say about the existence of God, who Christians believe to be an eternal spirit? Is the idea of a spirit itself an absurd, unverifiable idea? Science, by definition, is the study of the laws of physical matter. So in that sense, it can't directly speak to the question of God. And atheists seize upon that to declare that science disproves God. On the other hand, new trends and discoveries now taking place on the cutting edge of physics and cosmology have made it possible to make strong analogies to God based on what we now know about the universe and matter, and yes, even spirit.
So my opinion on this kind of thing is, I have a feeling, I think that there is this kind of intelligent, code or something like that, that everything runs off of, that can be tapped into and communicated with, and things like that, based off of my research that I've done. Not performed, but the research I've done, researching different papers and case files and stuff like that. There's pretty good proof for reincarnation. There's plenty of anomalous reincarnation stories and things like that. And so I do think that there is some sort of recycling of sorts of, I don't know that we completely can, keep our individuality when we transfer and then come back, but I do think that that it is pretty clear at this point that there is something that does happen after death, and that we do retain that, or we just kind of go right back into the consciousness of everything, and as we're being born, maybe there's a bit of, that consciousness or something like that. We don't study it here in the United States anywhere near as much, but in the eastern side of the world, there are cases all over the place where, down to the bullet point, this 4-year-old child is talking about a past life that he's had back in the 1700s or something like that. And I mean, it's just down to the detail accurate. And so, the way I put my scientific mind to it, because everybody's, oh, none of that stuff can be proven. Sure. But you have to keep in mind statistics. So if you look at some of these things and you go, okay, what is the statistical chance that a 4-year-old child is going to know a specific character in history, right? You can run the statistics on that. Then what is the chance that that 4-year-old child is going to know that person, know that person's occupation, know that person's, clothing type, know where that person lived, know the dates that that person was born? You start getting into the point of, statistical impossibility. And we hit that all the time with these reincarnation stories. And so that's why for me, it's pretty clear that there is some sort of recycling going on. I'm not claiming to say that I know exactly how it works, but it is pretty clear with that. But I have a feeling here they're going to use all the scientific data to say that Jesus is real. God, which I'm not saying that Jesus is not real. Let me get that straight. But that the God of the Old Testament is indeed the creator God of all reality. And that's where I just immediately fall off the wagon. But let's go into it.
The Bible have anything to say about all this? Of course. Dave Armstrong is here with me to unpack all of it with us. And Dave has written a ton about this and many other topics related to science and atheism and theism, etc. on his blog. We're going to drop a ton of links to those resources in the description of the video. There's also a free downloadable notes page for this episode.
And I feel like this is what the Christians do all the time, is that they try to say, see, here is this proof that there is intelligent design in the universe. Thus, the Old Testament God is real. No, if there is proof that there's intelligent design in the universe, that does not automatically mean that Christianity is the true religion. Let's get that straight out the gates, right? Because there's plenty of religions around the planet. There's plenty of stories around the planet that have different creator gods. And so, we could go down the list of, okay, now which creator God is the one who created Earth, right?
And if you are joining us for the first time, we encourage you to click like, subscribe to Catholic Bible Highlights, comment on the video before you leave, support the channel if you can, and share this video if you think it would be a blessing to somebody that you know. Dave, I know that the themes of science and scripture are some of your favorite things to discuss, so congratulations. Here we are. Where are we headed today?
Yeah, something a little different. Yeah. I think people will like it. I hope they do. This is responding to atheist and critic of theism, guy named Bob Seidensticker. He used to run the influential Cross-Examine blog, which is no longer online, but in its heyday, it was a clearinghouse for hundreds of anti-Bible and anti-Christianity arguments. I replied to him 85 times in writing.
Wow.
And all were ignored. Another surprise. One of his articles is called Defending 10 Atheist Arguments, 4 of 5. In it, he made the following provocative statements that will serve as our starting point. St. Thomas Aquinas loved to state opposing views first and then analyze and refute them. That's what we're doing too. Let's take a look at what our atheist friend believes. Kenny's going to play the atheist for a few minutes.
I'm just pretending, everyone. Okay. Here we go. What is God made of? There is no evidence that spiritual energy exists, so we can conclude that psychics, ghosts, and gods are non-existent. Otherwise, God has nothing to be made of. You can't just magic something into existence with a definition. God is not made of anything, least of all spiritual energy, but he's made of spirit, or he is spirit, or something. This is the problem with just hand-waving stuff into existence. Your embarrassing ad hoc arguments will mean you'll no longer be able to sit at the adult table. So God is not made of matter or, heaven forbid, spiritual energy, but he's made of something, right?
Yeah, my perspective on that whole thing is just physics is just not, we're just not there yet. Physics, it's an evolving field. 20 years ago, everybody thought that there was, or I guess maybe not 20, maybe it was 40 years ago. Everybody thought that they had figured out everything there was to figure out about physics before Karl Planck. Nope, that was completely the wrong word. It's not Karl, it's something else. I can't believe I butchered his name. But yeah, before, the research of quantum physics and stuff like that. So whenever you're going into quantum physics, there's plenty of phenomenon that you can look into. The double slit experiment is one that can be contested, a little bit back and forth, but there's just so many different, what do you call it? I can't think of the word that I'm trying to think of, but there's so many different expressions that these subatomic particles do that just don't make any sense at all. And so, there's just a lot of evidence. And I am making I do want to kind of do like an online, so I'm going to have a website soon here in just a little bit. But what I want to do is kind of put together a video series of kind of my path and how I was in college studying biochemistry and things like that, and how I eventually, became an atheist, and then after enough research decided that, atheism wasn't for me, and this idea of some sort of cosmic intelligence, a universal cosmic intelligence was more my, didn't mean to kick you guys. A universal cosmic intelligence was more my route, kind of agreeing with Einstein and Planck and other people like that, who don't necessarily believe that the God of the Bible is true, but there is some sort of universal intelligence at hand that seems to have some sort of conscious design in it, right? And that's as far, because in science, just because we see something doesn't mean we throw a label at it and say, this is what it is. No, if we see a creature that has four legs and, four legs and a tail and a skull and, some canine teeth, we don't rush to say, oh, that's a dog. No, we say, no, that's a skeleton with a canine teeth, right? And so the problem with Christianity is they always make the jump to say that everything is, because there are these things that happen, there is this stuff that means that the Old Testament Bible is correct. And it's like, no, but it's not. Like, I don't know how to tell you that. But I do want to make a video series kind of going, kind of I'm trying to do it step by step, but it's not a step-by-step process because it was so long ago that I may even have to go as far as opening up some textbooks and stuff like that, which I do have all of my textbooks, and my big, massive phase contrast, fluorescent, inverted microscope that took up half of my kitchen whenever I was in undergrad. But
don't play Simon Says, just tell us. And whatever you say God is made of, show us that it exists.
So what I wanted to say about that, as far as like, what is God made of, right? The reality is there's so many states of physics that we just don't understand. We just don't understand that. And there's so many anomalous things that humans have witnessed that, if you stop throwing shade at people's experiences as far as not like their spiritual experiences and things like that, because those are definitively difficult to prove and stuff. But if we just look at the more, ET contact type of experiences, these happen all over the planet, all over the world for hundreds of years. It's a natural phenomenon that happens on the human planet. It's just what happens. So when you see their craft kind of coming into 3D dimension and then disappearing, well, they're utilizing, a set of physics principles that we just don't understand. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, Area 52 is an amazing podcast where he brings on a lot of congressmen and stuff like that. And they just have the ET chat. I've experienced that a couple of times in my life, maybe 2 to 3 times in my life. And so, yeah, for me, it's kind of a non, it's a known thing. I mean, a lot of people that I know who have spent any significant amount of time out in the wilderness or out in the woods or anything like that, and it's a significant amount of time. You have to be outside, typically at night. So most people who are living in these big, massive cities are probably not going to experience anything. But if you live out in the woods for a while, you'll experience stuff. And it's really interesting. But to me, I'm not trying to say that, that is God. Christians would run to say that those are either demons or angels or all sorts of crap. What they are is some sort of intelligent thing that we don't understand yet, right? But I'd like to research it. I'd like to openly research it, but that requires dollars, right? But yeah, so that's why for me, taking the 3D physics world and saying nothing exists outside of the 3D, that's just not the case. We just don't understand the universe that we live in. We understand the planet that we live on, but there's so many things in the universe that we still just don't understand.
Close quote. Oh, there you go.
Good job. Now, it's our atheist critics who are constantly informing us Christians that atheism itself is, alas, not a formulated worldview, but only the absence of belief in God. I wish I had a dime for every time I've heard that. Yet, lo and behold, now we witness the spectacle of an atheist complaining that we can't define spirit in a way other than what it is not matter. It's one thing for atheists to challenge theists to produce arguments in favor of the existence of God. We produce dozens of those, but of course, none are ever good enough for the hardcore atheist. It's quite another thing to argue that an immaterial or spirit being...
So I do want to talk about the Christian evidence for God. I am not 100% up to date on all the crazy stuff, okay? On the scientific side of things, I'm a little bit more up to date. Did I just hit this? It's still working. Yeah. On the scientific side of things, I'm more up to date. On the Christian side of all of the evidence, I'm not 100% up to date on all that. The idea that, there was a flood and we found Noah's Ark, and resting in the mountains of Ararat is this skeleton of a boat that fits exactly the Bible's dimensions. Okay. So two of every animal on the planet got inside of that tiny little boat. That doesn't make any sense at all, right? Just because you found a boat doesn't mean that the Old Testament God is the creator of the universe, we went over to Sodom and Gomorrah and we saw the raining sulfur. Okay, have you ever heard of natural disasters and natural events? I mean, that sulfur rain could have been from some sort of volcano that went off, right? It's just, this is a human thing. This is the human thing, and this is what we have to look past. Things happen, catastrophes happen, these crazy floods happen, and then we say, God did this, right? Not to bring up a sore subject, but here in Texas, we just had a flood that wiped out a Christian camp. And it was really sad. There was a lot of kids that unnecessarily died. It was, to be frank, to be stern, disgusting to see, because that river floods all the time, and that exact Christian camp, or at least one on that river, had a flood that killed kids before. So why would you continue to put your Christian camp on a river that is constantly flooding and killing people? This is a very poor insight. So let's get that out of the way. I understand it's hurt, it's sad. I feel bad for a lot of the people who went through all that loss. But at the end of the day, all I heard on my side was, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. But when something happens in California, when something happens in Oregon, when something happens in Vancouver, the Southern Bible Belt stance is, well, they're going away from God and God is punishing them. But then whenever we hit floods in Texas, it's, oh God, God's about to return, God's about to return. And sure enough, we have the rapture thing happening again, right? It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. We can ground this pretty easy. Shit happens on this planet and it's natural. Like, it's not that deep. It is not that deep. Whenever Lupita, I'm Hispanic, why am I saying it like that? Whenever Lupita goes over and, keels over, it's not because she did something and God was pissed at her. It is because she drank some stagnant water that probably had a bunch of bacteria inside of it, and she probably got sepsis or something like that, right? Or maybe she got giardia, right? I mean, it's these things happen, right? I see this in my own personal life all the time. My sister, she's going through dialysis, and my mom's response whenever I was a kid, and her still response to why my sister is sick, is because, well, your sister's gay. That's why she's sick. It's because God's punishing her for being gay. Okay, well, she's been sick since she was a child, so make that make sense. She was 10 years old with jaundiced eyes. It doesn't make any sense, right?
The very category is absurd. So Bob's argument has the following logical structure.
And we are going to speed this up a bit because I am chiming in a little bit more than I had anticipated.
Energy is non-existent. 2, God supposedly consists of such spiritual energy. 3, therefore God cannot exist, since he is said to consist of a thing that itself doesn't exist. Whether spirit and immaterial beings exist is a key premise that lies behind the classic theistic understanding of God. Many atheists merely assume that certain things aren't true, and to hear them tell it can't possibly be true either. Most atheists are philosophical materialists. That is the view that everything can be reduced to matter and physical processes, and that nothing exists beyond that. A few atheists are, however, what's called dualists. They believe that something exists that can't be reduced to observable matter. I always cite the brilliant philosopher David Chalmers, who has 4 books with Oxford University Press and 1 with MIT. So he's a smart guy. As one prominent example, his Wikipedia page notes that, quote, he believes mental states are ontologically distinct from and not reducible to physical systems, unquote. Very interesting stuff. Mm-hmm. Bob had a field day mocking Christians for believing that God is a spirit or immaterial, not a physical thing with atoms, etc. Once again, as always, in his colorful and entertaining polemics, I dealt with this guy for a couple of years.
Yeah, as far as the mental states thing, mind is incredibly interesting. I've experienced this a couple of times in my own life, but there are things that just, and this is why I always say you have to go back to the statistics of something, right? Because whenever you just say, oh, this person had a dream. Okay, well, a dream is a dream. It's just a dream. I was riding on a pony. My pony jumped off of the moon. Then I face planted in Venus. And now, I'm drowning in a puddle of mud. And that's how my day is going to go tomorrow, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense, okay? That's just a dream, right? But then there are some dreams, and people have had these before. I've had these before. Family members of mine have had these before, where your entire day, events of your day are what do you call it? The events of your day, you see them before they happen. I've told this story many times on the channel before, but there was one time where I was with my parents up in Alaska, and we were going up to the Arctic Circle. I was packing out. I had my little Santa Fe that I refused to let die. All of my cars, I refuse to let them die. You know, I've put timing chains in. I mean, I've done all sorts of crap to my cars. I don't let those suckers die. You know, they're with me. They're with me for the long haul. You know, but yeah, you know, we were all packed out. We were headed up to Fairbanks, and I got a call from one of my cousins down in Honduras. My mom's from Honduras. My dad's white. I got a call from one of my cousins from Honduras. My mom got a call. I was driving the vehicle. My dad was in the passenger seat, front passenger seat. And my cousin calls my mom to tell her, we've had such a crazy dream. I had such a crazy dream last night. Okay, tell us your crazy dream. Well, I had this crazy dream where you guys were in a really cold place, and you were in this white vehicle that had a bunch of stuff on top of it. And, you know, there was this guy that I didn't know who was driving, and Bill was sitting in the front seat with him, and you were sitting in the seat behind him, and you guys were driving across this really, really cold place that looked super, super desolate. And there was this bridge that was really scary and very deep, and it had holes in the bridge, and then there was these lollipop looking trees, and it just looked so scary. I just wanted to tell you today to be careful, be careful. And my mom goes, oh my God, that's so crazy. Ha ha ha. Guess where we are? Guess where we are? She's like, where are you guys? Are you all in Houston? No, we're in Alaska. What? We're in Alaska? This girl who had this dream had no idea that my parents were in Alaska in the wintertime, right? So, of course, it's going to be frozen. I'd never met this girl. You know, you got cousins in Honduras. You've got 1 billion of them. You know, half of the country of Honduras is probably my cousin. So, and so, you know, you just don't meet everybody. That's what it comes down to. And so I didn't know this girl from Adam. And even though he probably never existed. But this girl, she, first of all, nailed my car. First of all, my parents were in Alaska. She didn't know that they were in cold environment. Okay, so we can look at the statistics of that. What are the different environments a person can be in? They can be in a desert environment. They can be in a cold environment. They can be in a city environment. They can be in a sunny beach environment. They can be in a luscious mountain environment. And she picked cold environment. Okay, she got 1 of 5. Okay, next bit of information. She said, oh, there was a white SUV. Okay. Well, I drive an SUV. There's SUV, there's pickup trucks, there's sedans, there's passenger vans, there's cars, there's buses, there's trucks, right? Out of all those, she picked SUV. Okay, so there's a 1 of 7 event. So you multiply that by your 1 of 5 event. Oh, and she nailed the fact that I had stuff on top of my car. Well, what's the probability of a person having stuff on top of their car? Well, when you look out, you know, in general, you don't see a bunch of people with roof racks with a bunch of stuff loaded on top of the roof rack. But we'll just say it's 1 of 2. Okay, it's not that, because the probability of seeing a vehicle with a roof rack with stuff on top of the roof rack, right? And so then you go to, okay, the seating arrangement. Okay, the guy that she didn't know was driving, and Bill was sitting in the front seat with him, and you were sitting in the seat behind him. Okay, so there's 4 seats, and there's 3 different possible configurations, or 3 different people inside of those 4 seats. Actually, technically 5, but so, okay, you can scramble everybody which way around, and that's like a 1 in 21 event or something like that, right? And so then, and I had no idea about driving up north, because at this point in time, I'd never driven up to the Arctic Circle. And so we drive up and we cross this sketchy fucking bridge. It is a 1-lane bridge. It's covered in ice, because Alaska is covered in ice. The roads are covered in ice. Everything is covered in fucking ice. Your brakes are covered in ice. Your beard's covered in ice. Everything's ice. Which is why I love it so much, because I like cold. But yeah. So we show up to this bridge that is a 1-lane bridge that just has two, what were they, maybe 8 by 8 beams side by side. So 2 8 by 8 beams, 2 8 by 8 beams. And so you had basically 16 inches, or maybe there were 3 8 by 8 beams, 3 8 by 8 beams. So you basically had tire routes where you had to keep your tires on these specific routes, and down the middle of the bridge, nothing but holes. There was no wood there because I guess the state doesn't have enough money to put another beam of wood across the bottom of it. And then on the sides, either side, there wasn't any wood. Sketchy fucking bridge, really freaking deep. Mountain region, obviously it's Alaska. And I was kind of nervous about that one. So I had studded tires, which is nice because then you don't slide around on stuff like that. But anyways, so then there's the other situation. Okay, out of all the bridge types, first of all, she nailed that there was a bridge in a cold environment. But out of all the bridge types, you got suspension bridge, you got drawbridge, all this kind of stuff, right? So then you add that onto the statistics. And then you get lollipop trees, which how many damn trees look like lollipops, right? And that was because the snow drift was so bad. The temperature was kind of warm and freezing. And so what happened was that all the snow stuck together with this really high wind speed, and then it had kind of frozen, and all of these trees looked like damn lollipops. These were all events that she had told us about 5 hours before we had experienced those events. We had never seen the lollipop trees. We'd never seen the bridge. And she nailed our seating arrangements while we were driving. So in her night before, in her 12 hours before, she was apparently so connected to either my parents or whatever that she was able to witness the events that hadn't even taken place that day, right? We call that data. If you look into a lot of conscious research, it's called data. You look into remote viewing, you look into, they're called data hits, right? It's where maybe everything wasn't perfect, but it was a hit. It was correct information, right? And this girl just nailed every single bit of information. So these things happen. These things happen, you know, and it's one of those things where just like the Christians will gaslight everybody into saying, well, that's very clear evidence that Yahweh is God. It's like, no, you know, there's evidence of consciousness, but it's not that Yahweh is God, right? And on the flip side of that, you know, whenever the scientific community refuses to look at that stuff, we can't research that data with any sort of amount of dollars. And so then it just stays taboo because we never get to research it. So let's research it. No, there's a Stephen Greer, I want to say is the guy's name. He does Stephen Greer is more focused around different, you know, universal species, things like that. Whereas the Monroe Institute is the main institute that studies consciousness itself.
Theists are made out to be anti-scientific ignoramuses and dumbbells. The argument that follows is one of analogy that we do a lot here, arguing for one thing based on its profound similarity to another, with basically the same epistemological basis. That is, similar reasons for why it's believed. Before we get to that, let's take a brief look at how the Bible describes God and some of his extraordinary qualities in relation to the universe that he created. Here's what it tells us.
It will start in the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 6. It says, "Thou art the Lord, thou alone. Thou hast made heaven, the heaven of heavens, with all their host, the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that is in them, and thou preservest all of them." And then Psalm chapter 139, verse 7. "Whither shall I go from thy spirit, or whither shall I flee from thy presence?" And then Isaiah chapter 42, verse 5. "Thus says God, the Lord, who created the heavens and stretched them out, who spread forth the earth and what comes from it, who gives breath to the people upon it and spirit to those who walk in it." And then Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 24. "Do I not fill heaven and earth, says the Lord?" In the New Testament, Romans chapter 11, verse 36. "For from him and through him and to him are..."
Little interesting thing here. This is the thing with the New Testament. Romans, Paul. I want to say that's Paul. Hebrews, I'm not 100% sure about. But it in general, that's why I don't pay attention to a lot of stuff that Paul says. We've already gone very in depth with what Paul teaches.
All things. Also in 2 Corinthians chapter 3:17, we read, the Lord is the Spirit. And then Ephesians chapter 4, verse 6, one God and Father of us all, who is above all and through all and in all. Just three more. Colossians chapter 1, verse 17 says, he, that is Jesus, is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And then Hebrews, we'll have the last two verses there. Chapter 1, verse 3, it says, upholding the universe by his, that is Jesus, word of power. And finally, in the second chapter of Hebrews, verse 10,
Jesus is assumed there.
he, for whom and by whom all things exist.
With these passages in mind, ones that not only refer to God as the creator of the universe, but also its preserver and upholder, let's now take a look at some amazing, mind-boggling discoveries of science regarding the universe. Physicists and astronomers are currently quite excited about new phenomena called dark energy and dark matter. These ideas or concepts have only made their appearance over the last 30 years or so. The term dark energy was coined by cosmologist Michael Turner in 1998. It's now widely accepted. An article on the NASA website entitled Dark Energy provides a basic definition. So now Kenny's going to play the white robe scientist and read this stuff.
First I was an atheist, now I'm a scientist. Okay.
Yeah, right. All kinds of things.
So the quote says, what exactly is dark energy? The short answer is, we don't know. But we do know that it exists. It's making the universe expand at an accelerating rate.
Dark energy is the Old Testament God. Let's look at his fruits. Let's look at them. Dark energy is very clearly the Old Testament God. Let's just... because we already know they're going to say something. I'm like,
Right. And approximately 68.3 to 70% of the universe is dark energy. It goes on. Right now, dark energy is just the name that astronomers gave to the mysterious something that is causing the universe to expand at an accelerated rate. Dark energy has been described by some as having the effect of a negative pressure that's pushing space outwards. However, we don't know if dark energy has the effect of any type of force at all. There are many ideas floating around about what dark energy could possibly be.
The article goes on to list 4 theories that scientists propose to try to explain it, but it has no conclusion other than, quote, dark energy is one of the great mysteries of the universe, unquote. An earlier version of the same article that I linked to 4 years ago elaborated, referring also to another mysterious entity, dark matter.
That article says, quote, it turns out that roughly 68% of the universe is dark energy. Dark matter makes up about 27%. The rest, everything on Earth, everything ever observed, with all of our instruments, all normal matter, adds up to less than 5% of the universe. One explanation for dark energy is that it is a property of space. Albert Einstein was the first person to realize that empty space is not nothing. Space has amazing properties, many of which are just beginning to be understood. One version of Einstein's gravity theory, the version that contains a cosmological constant, makes a second prediction. Empty space can possess its own energy.
NASA's article called The Universe's Building Blocks asserts regarding dark matter the following.
It says, like ordinary matter, dark matter takes up space and holds mass. While scientists have measured that dark matter makes up about 27% of the cosmos, they're not sure what it is. Theories include several kinds of as yet unidentified types of particles that rarely interact with normal matter. Scientists today think dark matter exists in a vast web-like structure that winds through the whole universe, a gravitational scaffold that attracts most of the cosmos' normal matter. They've determined that dark matter isn't composed of known particles of matter because the universe would look very different if it were. The search for what makes up...
Hey, okay, you guys can't hear me. Sorry, I was looking at my microphone. My microphone input level was not changing, and so I was like, okay, I don't know if my microphone's actually on or not. Sorry about that.
Dark matter continues, close quote.
This is fascinating stuff. I wonder, not many people have probably heard of it. It's so new. But if these overviews from NASA are true, it turns out that science in all its glory, arguably atheism's quasi-religion, has been studying a mere 3 to 5% of all that exists in the universe. 68 to 70%, that is dark energy, is something other, maybe spirit, than what we have known up till now as matter, with protons and neutrons, etc., like what I learned in school when I grew up. Another 27% consists of the equally mysterious dark matter, which has but...
So, you know, I wouldn't make the leap to say that it's spirit, because obviously they're going to make the leap from spirit to the Holy Spirit or to some shit like that. But, you know, it's everything in the universe is conscious. And you can make that jump by understanding that every particle in the universe is conscious, because every subatomic particle behaves in a conscious way. Now, I already know, you know, there's some people out there saying that the double slit experiment has already been, has already been debunked and stuff like that. But there's other experiments that involve subatomic particles. There's experiments involving atomic particles that show that, you know, the double slit experiment is just the one that's most easily available. But at this point, they've gone so deep into all the different experiments with quantum physics, and they're seeing that these particles themselves do behave in different ways, in completely different ways, based off of, you know, whatever. There's this will be a part of my little series that I'm eventually going to put together after I get my diesel running. But I, you know, I do want to go into that and kind of make like an organized, like, okay, you know, this is kind of the route that I took, because I do understand that my route is a little strange for not, you know, I don't do the Christian thing. I think everybody can look at that and say that's just kind of crazy. But I do think that there is just some sort of, you know, eternal consciousness that a person, if they wanted to, could tap into. I don't think you have to go outside of yourself to tap into it, because if the particles themselves that you are made up of are conscious, and they are part of the conscious code or the conscious beingness of all of the universe, then you should only have to go within. But regardless of that, whether you want to take that route or not, one of the biggest benefits I found of walking the spiritual path versus the religious path is that the spiritual path, you know, holds a mirror in front of you. And I love that. A lot of people don't like that. A lot of people don't like to see their faults. They don't like to see how their thoughts and beliefs kind of, you know, interact with their world. I love that. Anytime there's something going on, I want a big fat mirror in my face saying, look at all of your faults. And I can look at them and say, oh yeah, these are, you know, deep aspects about myself that, you know, either it's a mask that I'm putting up to keep people happy, or a mask that I'm wearing to try to keep a person in a relationship happy, or a mask that I'm putting on in the dating scene, you know, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, you know, walking the path of authenticity is kind of what the spiritual path is all about. You don't have to be spiritual. You don't have to believe in anything. But just like how, you know, aerospace research and sending astronauts to the moon is how we got battery power drills, and how those batteried power drills have exponentially helped everybody in life. You know, the components of the spiritual path can also help people dramatically in their life, regardless of what you believe, right? It doesn't matter that we're not trying to, you know, it doesn't matter that I'm not currently trying to go to the moon. I benefit from the fact that I have a DeWalt drill, right? All that kind of stuff.
No, quote, known particles of matter, unquote. Whatever sense that makes, but the last 3 to 5% of the universe is made up of matter as science has understood it up to this time. What we all learned in school. Obviously, non-material entities, or whatever we call them, have been a far more important aspect of the universe than we, least of all materialist atheists, had ever imagined. We Christians have thought about it for 2,000 years, but atheists not so much. Meanwhile, Christians and other theists are mocked and derided and considered simpletons simply because we have believed all along that God isn't material either, but rather is an eternal and omnipresent spirit who created the world. What's the big difference? I see very little. Now, this is the analogy coming in here. We're told that dark energy and dark matter are very mysterious entities that make up 95% of the universe. The Bible teaches that God is mysteriously present in 100% of it and preserves and upholds all of it. I see similarities there. I don't know. See what people think. If scientists can manage to believe in things they can't prove and know next to nothing about, only about what the unknown thing theoretically causes, then why can't theists and Christians believe in an extraordinary spirit or, quote, energy that doesn't have material characteristics? We've never made the claim that everything we believed in could and must be proven scientifically or empirically. Theology is partly derived from philosophy.
But here's the reality, is that it should be able to be, right? It should be able to be. And this is kind of my belief of everything, is that, you know, we're just not there yet with science, with physics, with stuff like that. We're kind of poking at the veil, if you would, but we're just not there yet. I think we're going to get there soon being certainly within the next 50 to 100 years. But we're just not there yet, you know. And we see this happening from the Christian side of things all the time, is that they hold this belief, they hold this belief, they hold this belief. They see some data out there that fits their belief system, and because it fits their belief system, they're going to take it for themselves and use it to promote their product, which is, you know, to be frank, well, you know, Christianity has its good things, it has its bad things. They do a lot of good. You know, there's a lot of feeding the homeless, helping the community. These things are good things, right? What they do in their own personal families, how they treat their wives, things like that. This is different. But we won't go too much into that. I have plenty of videos on that. So feel free to scroll down kind of the list of videos to see how the Bible instructs us to treat women. Spoiler alert, it's not good. And so, but just because your belief system, you know, doesn't work with physical matter, does not mean that your belief system should be above physical matter and should not be able to be proved, right? The research that I went down, the only reason why I was kind of turned back from going an atheist route to being more open to whatever the universal consciousness is because of my research with plants. That's what switched me. And so, yeah.
Itself a study of mostly non-material concepts, and God reveals himself through his inspired word, the Bible. Conclusion is that it looks like spirit, and a very pervasive one at that, is quite possible according to the latest advances of science. Materialism, the philosophy that has dominated atheism since time immemorial, is just about dead as a doornail. The Bible and Jews and Christians have asserted this for over 4,200 years. Now science is catching up. Better late than never, I guess. Why then are Bob Seidensticker and almost all of his millions of fellow atheists prattling on as if good old-fashioned matter, before we get to dark matter and dark energy, is all there is? Scientists believe, at least at this point in time, that indeed it's only 3 to 5% of all that exists in the universe. That's something to wrap your head around. 3 to 5%. Bob needs to get up to speed and catch up with the latest scientific advances before further embarrassing himself and his fellow atheists. Who's against science? Christians have nothing to fear from it at all. It's always been harmonious with our views, and today it is more than ever.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good stuff, Dave. I like this. I know you love this stuff, science and scripture, and I think it's a terrific subject. And of course, you know, it's general apologetics. It's something that all Christians, regardless of their background, have to deal with, you know, on a regular basis.
And theists beyond Christianity, theists, people who believe in some kind of supreme being.
Right. I think as I drill down, I just have 3 or 4 big ideas here. Or maybe share them one at a time, see what you think. The first is, you know, of all the texts that we read, I think my favorite is Colossians chapter 1:17, where it says, "In him all things hold together." It's like that's a sentence that needs some unpacking there. And it strikes me as really as one of the most cosmologically, if you will, loaded statements in the whole Bible. So that it's not just a theological claim that's being made there. It's really, as I said, a cosmological claim. It's describing this sustaining reality that holds everything in the universe together. And so now we have physicists telling us that, 95% of what holds the universe together is something you can't see or explain. So that is, to me, remarkable, you know.
Yep. Well, it's the same old thing there. If you
Yeah, I don't know about that. You know, at the end of the day, you can look at the fact that all of this became about from one, right? There was one thing, and then it blew up, which was the Big Bang, and now it has accelerated throughout the universe, which is space that we don't understand, which is a part of this one thing that we don't understand. And I personally, my belief is that that entirety of all of everything is that, you know, that consciousness that I was telling you about. But here's kind of my take about that. You know, this whole thing, right? The whole Earth thing. When you zoom in, right, we are so insanely limited to the fact that we can only perceive out of these eyes and out of the senses, right? There are billions and billions and billions of tiny bits of you that if we were to pull them off of you, we would not classify them as you, but when assembled, they are you. But when they're pulled off of you, right? We call these things cells, right? Your brain cells, your neurons, right? So let's take my body. We chop the body in half, you know, from my stomach up. Which part of that is John, right? We take the shoulders and take the head off, not to be so gruesome. Which part of that is John, right? So, okay, we assume the head is John. Okay, so then we take the head and we slice it down the middle and we break it into two parts. Which part is John, right? And you keep just ripping things apart, ripping things apart, ripping things apart, ripping things apart. And the question is, at what point does it end? At what point do I end, right? Because the body that I'm given right now comes from the earth. It comes from the universe, right? The carbon atoms, the oxygen atoms, the nitrogen atoms that make up my very skin have been around since the beginning of time. Think about that, right? The electricity that is running on your phone, that energy that is powering your device, the chemical energy that is powering your device has been around since the beginning, okay? There is nothing new, technically speaking. I'm not about to be 30 years old. I'm like 460 billion years old. But this assembled state of me is only 29 years old, right? And so then the question becomes, okay, well, your consciousness. So not a lot of people have had the pleasure of having this experience, but there is a state where you can walk away from your body. This is the consciousness states that they study at the Monroe Institute, gateway process, all that kind of stuff. There is a state where you can walk away from your body, and that is a state where when you do, you know, jump out of your body, you look back at your body and you recognize that you exist outside of your body. But then the trippy thing happens. So then, how long have I existed? If I've existed outside of the body, then how long has my existence been? Well, potentially since the beginning of time, right? And so this is kind of the idea from some of the Gnostic texts and some of the, you know, kind of Enlightenment teachings and things like that, that when Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am, is because we all are from the beginning, right? The atoms, the cells, the very, you know, teeth, your bones, everything is from the beginning, right? Just because you're assembled and organized in this specific state in this specific point in time does not mean that you are that specific state at that specific point in time. Does that make any sense? Am I going a little too crazy for you guys? You know, walk away from the attachment to this motor car that you're driving, because at the end of the day, this is just an engine. This is a CPU. This is a bunch of mechanics that's going on here, right? But when that goes to dirt, that consciousness takes off somewhere into something, and then a baby, you know, 40 years later is going to say, oh yeah, I once lived a life where I was a dude in 2026 and my name was John Anderson and I always wore flannel because I've worn flannel as a child and I feel very comfortable in flannel and I like flannel. Don't try to get me to wear anything else except occasionally a t-shirt, right? But it's just, it's one of those things where it's just, when you step away from this thing, and you can try it. Not everybody can do it, and that's okay. But there is a state that you can reach without taking any hallucinogens, without taking any drugs. No, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to drink anything. It is a natural state humans have been experiencing for thousands of years, where they will occasionally pop out of their bodies and they'll have this crazy, oh my God, what in the world? And they'll come back and, oh, I met God. It's like, no, you probably just, accidentally popped out of your body for a moment in time. That doesn't necessarily mean that you met God. So, but then the question becomes this, is that baby that comes back in 20 years who claims to be me, who knows everything about my story, who knows my name, my last name, the name of my wife, the different trades that I had done, and all this kind of stuff, who knows absolutely everything about my life, even though he's only 3 to 4 years old, how does that make any sense, right? And that's exactly my point, is that there's some sort of recycling that's happening, right? And so, they're making the point here that, here's the dark matter, here's this, here's all of consciousness, here's a lot of things that we don't understand. So the Old Testament is true. No. This is what I love about science. We cut out all of the crap and we just look at the evidence that we see, right? That's why it's called the evolution theory, right? It's not a theory because, oh God, I can already hear, it's a theory. Like, no. Scientifically speaking, theory is the closest thing to absolute fact. There is no such thing as fact in science, right? And so, but, it's an evolution theory. And essentially what it means is that this is what is accepted as truth until something else topples it over, right? The Bible doesn't do that. I'm sorry, the Bible does not do that. It doesn't make any sense at all. And so, trying to topple over the evolution theory, Christians saying that the planet's 6,000 years old. I mean, it's too easy to topple that entire belief system. And so, it's just a bit wacky. But let's get back into this.
I argue once with atheists, and I have for hundreds of hours. It's like science is their religion. They have nothing else. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
They don't have any kind of philosophical, well, some philosophy, but everyone has a worldview. I've gone through this with them. They'll deny it. They just say, well, we just simply don't believe in God. But they also believe in something.
Right.
And that's called materialism.
Yeah.
So, but they're big on, I say science is their religion, whether you're aware of it or not. But science itself, if we go back to the debate, is a philosophy. It's called empiricism. And that philosophy starts with axioms, which is things that can't be proven, like any other knowledge. So they just built it up from that. But the Christian says, yeah, we love science, nothing to fear from it. Most of the great scientists in history were either Christians or theists, as I've written a lot about. We're not scared of it at all. It doesn't contradict Christianity.
Right.
And then stuff like this comes along, like we had the last 50, 60 years, we had the Big Bang come about that even Einstein disagreed with at first. It was a priest, actually. I never remember his name, Lemaitre, I think, who came up with that. Priest who was a physicist who came up with the Big Bang, which is now standard cosmology. And it's completely consistent with the Bible. The universe began.
The reason for the Big Bang is because we see that the universe is expanding from a point, right? Everything is being thrown out, spread out. And so if everything is going out in time, right, from now to there in our linear time. If everything is going out, then if we go back in time, there is a point at which all was one, right? So that's kind of where we get the idea that there was this one thing that existed, and some explosion of some sort happened, and these things is what came of it, right? A lot of these rocks and things, and at the end of the day, I like to think of this, and it's kind of a crazy thought. It's kind of a crazy way of thinking, but at the end of the day, all that exists is energy. Period. Right? Energy in its different organizations. I am one type of organized type of energy. The device that you're using to watch this video is a different type of organized energy. This microphone is a different type of organized energy. At the end of the day, it's all atomic bonds, covalently bonded. Well, not necessarily covalently bonded, because sometimes you can just whoosh your hands around and feel all the atomic particles wisping up against your face, right? Whenever you feel the wind blowing on your face, there's no covalent bonds holding the wind together, right? And so yeah, at the end of the day, this is why I say that we're limited by the fact that we can only see out of these eyes, is because, how is it that our bodies, our kidney, our endocrine system, our digestive system, our whatever, this can all communicate with each other? They are all communicating with each other. You're hungry, there's cellular communication happening. You want to eat something, cellular communication happening. You have a specific hankering, maybe you're looking for something salty, there's cellular communication that's happening that's making you want something salty. You don't understand it. All you feel is the craving for something salty. And this is my point, is that there's so many, I like I said, I am working on kind of a series of videos that kind of take people down the path that I had walked down. There is some sort of communication that is happening at different levels, right? So you have to assume, for instance, plants, they also share their nutrients with each others and stuff like that. Trees out in the forest and all that kind of stuff. Ecosystems, communicating with other ecosystems and things like that. And so the question becomes like the coral. They all spawn at the very same moment. This specific species will all spawn together at the very same moment, respecting other coral spawning points of time. How does this all make sense, right? And so the answer is there's simply forms of communication that we don't understand, right? There's levels of communication that we don't understand. And this is what really brought me back to just, understanding that there was some sort of universal connection that couldn't be explained. And here I go, oh, it's God. It's the Old Testament. It's Jesus. Oh my God. No, sit.
In the second, and everything came into existence with this bang up. Right. That sounds to us like God created, it's not, in no way does it contradict us.
Yeah.
But
well, yeah, because your view is that the planet's only 6,000 years old. Actually, they're Catholic. They may not believe that. But in the Protestant belief system, which according to in the Protestant belief system, I grew up Baptist. These two people, even though they're arguing for the existence of God, they're going to hell. So it doesn't matter that they're trying to be like, yeah, God exists. It doesn't matter, because according to my church, not my current church, but my church growing up, they would definitely be going to hell. And even though they're talking about God and they're having this great video, they're going to be having this video, from the pits of hell and all this kind of BS. And if they're not Church of Christ, then it doesn't matter, because they weren't baptized by the one true church for the forgiveness of sins. Jeez.
So sounds like I just want to.
I used to go to Church of Christ a long time ago whenever I was a kid. It was only for like a year or something like that.
And we're down to the point of There's everything begins with axioms, every form of knowledge.
Yes. Well, and I think the second thing that I love about what you presented here is the analogy that you provide, which I think deserves some unpacking. So the scientist says, well, we know dark energy exists based on its observable effects. It's a basic short way of saying it. So okay, like the observable expansion of the universe, for instance. So what they're doing there is basically using the same, let's say, epistemological method that theists use when we point to creation, conscience, moral law, beauty, emotions, things like that, loving someone. Nobody has ever isolated those things in a lab, and the scientists say, well, you can't isolate dark energy in a lab. And as Christians, we go, right, you can't do that with everything. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So scientists will infer, they'll even write it, in their books, dark energy. Well, where's that? So we as Christians then infer from the effect of things that God is behind it, that he has made it. So that's, for those of you who like highlighting your Bibles, that's Romans chapter 1, verse 20, that we know God by what he has made. And that's basically what we've been saying here. His invisible attributes are clearly perceived through what has been made. So like I said, your analogy there, I think, works really well.
Yeah, I think it's fun to think about stuff like this. You mentioned Colossians 1:17. I like the one after that, Hebrews 1:3, that Jesus is upholding the universe by his word of power. Yeah, that's as good as the other one. That's like trying to...
Okay, on the Jesus trip, let's have the Jesus chat. Jesus being God doesn't make any sense. First of all, he never once said that he wanted to be worshipped, all this kind of stuff, right? There was always, every step of the way, there was always separation between him and the Father in heaven. Thirdly, if Jesus is God, let's have this mind trip. Jesus is God, okay? God of the Old Testament. He's doing his thing. He's getting pissed off at people. He's randomly killing people and picking on his own followers because he has nothing else to do. So the God of the universe that has nothing better to do decides that he is going to come down in human form and fix the mess that he's made. Okay? He created this mess. He regretted creating this mess. And then he's going to come down in human form and fix this mess. But in his human form, he is completely different. I mean, does a 180 in the way he acts, in the way he is, in the way everything. He does a complete 180, right? He goes from being this really pissed off guy who is always ready to kill everybody, who's always ready. God of the Old Testament, to be frank, God of the Old Testament would just been like, okay, my creation killed me. I am going to kill my creation. That is the God of the Old Testament, right? You look at Noah. You look at Sodom and Gomorrah. You look at, Jericho. You look at all the cities that turned away from God, right? What did he do? He killed everybody consistently. Then Jesus came down as God, and God's creation killed God, and nothing? God's not going to go haywire on the Romans and kill all the Romans? It just doesn't make any sense, right? Why would Jesus have such a different personality from the Old Testament God? And why, whenever people say, good master, why would Jesus reply saying, do not call me good, for there is none good but our Father in heaven? Why would Jesus say that if he is the Father in heaven, right? Let's use a little bit of common sense here. All right, we don't have too much more in this. How many? 10. All right, we got about 9 more minutes. We'll get through this really quick. Sorry for making this video so long.
And I figure, what does that mean?
Right.
To me, it means that I don't think, this is my own opinion, but I think a lot of people would agree, God doesn't just create the world and the laws of matter and just let it be. I don't believe that. I think verses like this suggest that he's involved in the whole thing. Right. He said in most...
Ooh, I don't know about that. No, I don't know about that. You guys let me know how you feel about that statement in the comments. You know, I believe in a completely neutral consciousness. This idea that this supposedly loving, pissed off, kills everybody, now turned loving God is still, you know, doing everything I just don't know about that, guys. I know that the perception is that they would want him to be that way. Apologize about that. I thought that I was having issues with my audio because my little audio indicator had stopped moving, but apparently I didn't have issues with my audio. So back to this, because I already lost my train of thought and where I was going.
In the laws, but I don't think he's totally apart from it. That's what modern science wants to say, because it's methodologically naturalist, even though a good half of scientists are theists, according to all the polls that they take. But this idea that God is intimately involved in all of creation, that's what I believe. I think it's consistent with the Bible and philosophy and science.
Well, so this is where things would part, because Jesus in the book of Thomas would say that God is all of creation, right? That the entirety of everything, the entirety of the cosmos is, you know, the one deal, the one big deal, right? And so, well, once again, we kind of see here the leap to say their argument is simply this. There is evidence that there is some sort of intelligent design, and that means Christianity is right. That's basically what their evidence is in this entire video. As you know, that's not evidence. That's just jumping to conclusions. That's like saying, I heard some, you know, bushes outside and some rustling leaves. That means that there's a serial killer out in the bushes. No. What you heard was some bushes outside and you heard some leaves rustling about. But that does not mean that there's a serial killer out in the woods. Not because I've been afraid of that or anything like that. I live way the hell alone out in the woods, and I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, man, when I first moved here, now I'm kind of used to it. It doesn't bother me anymore, you know, but whenever I first moved out here, it was like, oh my God, I could not watch horror movies for anything. I just don't like horror movies, but it was just like, you know, I'm like, it's a rabbit, you know?
There's nothing in that is against science. They simply don't want to mention God when they're doing science. They'll say, well, you can't talk about God. That's theology, you know.
Right.
I don't buy it.
Yeah.
I think it all goes together.
I don't necessarily think that that's true. I think where you lose the scientific community is whenever you try to tell them that, you know, that the planet itself is 6,000 years old and that this book has absolutely everything that man needs to know about the universe, and all you have to do is read this one book and you don't have to do any other studying. You know, that's where you lose a lot of scientists. You don't lose, you know, science is about exploration. Let's be frank about that. Science is about having an open mind, about trying experiments, coming up with these different thought ideas, testing these different thought ideas with experiments, and looking at the data to see what the data says. That's what science is about. Now, in the scientific community in general, sure, there's a lot of arguments that get thrown about just because people have egos. At the end of the day, everybody's got an ego, right? The first time that von Leeuwenhoek said, there are these tiny little monsters that exist in the water, the entire science community took a shit on the guy. Because, no, you're stupid. How could there ever be? And then, oh, look, the creator of the microscope, Leeuwenhoek himself. Oh, look, you can see, oh, damn, hold on, there is shit inside the water. Oh, my God, what in the world, right? And then we decide, oh, all these patients keep dying. I perform surgeries on these patients and they die. And I perform surgeries on these patients and they die. And I don't know why my patients are dying. And then I forget the name of the surgeon who is responsible for this. But way back in like the 1800s, something like this. What's interesting is that whenever I wash my hands with ether before I perform surgery, my patients don't die. But whenever I just perform surgery, they die, and then they find out, oh, wait, there's infections, right? Like that's how the scientific community adapts to things, is that somebody comes up with this idea. The entire world shits on him for that idea. Then that person starts to publish research, starts to publish things like that. And then they start to do those experiments, conduct those experiments for themselves. And when they conduct those experiments for themselves, then they say, oh, wow, that guy actually has something, that dude's actually saying something that makes sense, right? But that's what science is. And so, yes, whenever you come up and say something like, oh yeah, there are other life forms out in the universe and, we interact with them and all this kind of stuff, you're going to have people who throw shit at you and, oh, you're so fucking stupid and all this kind of stuff. But then 50 to 60 years down the line, they're writing a book about the guy and how he was this innovator of intellect. And it's just like, okay, well, at the time, everybody was shitting on him. And I'm sure his life sucked, Like, honestly, whenever you read a lot of the scientific, research that happened throughout history, most of the time, the absolutely brilliant person had a shitty life. And because everybody was crapping on him the entire time. So... But yeah, well, I'm going to go ahead and speed this up a little bit more, and we'll just try to sit through this.
That God is involved, as this says, upholding the universe. That means something, or in him all things hold together. The one you read,
right?
It has to have some kind of meaning.
Yes, it does.
That's how I interpret it, off the top of my head, anyway. I haven't thought about it, but
yeah. Well, speaking of Hebrews, there's one that we should probably add to the list, and that's Hebrews chapter 11, verse 3. Another one of my favorites that we could add to the list. It says, "We know that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible." Another translation that is common is the New International Version says, "By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what is visible." And that's an important text for everything that you've presented here.
Yeah, it should have been on there. Well, glad you brought it up.
It's a first century statement that the visible universe has invisible foundations, which, just kind of going into your dark matter connection point there, we seem to be saying the same thing, don't we? Modern cosmology is confirming with dark energy and dark matter that something's holding everything together. So the author of Hebrews doesn't have a telescope, but he does have revelation. That is insight from God about how things work. Which I think maybe is probably my final big idea here, Dave, and that is, the David Chalmers point that you included, which I love, and it's underappreciated, and it's a Christian apologetic, which is simply this: you can't account for everything using your five senses. There are a lot of things that can be said to exist that materialism just cannot account for, and that is what Christians have always said, always.
Yeah, so a guy like Chalmers, he's able to, the great thinker, he can get out of the boxes that people put themselves in. It's like, we have to think like this. We can't think outside the box, as the saying goes. So he has managed to do that, and it's fascinating. Here, he's an atheist, but he thinks there are things other than matter.
Yes.
So, like you said, so do we. We've always said that.
Exactly.
So, welcome to the club,
Welcome to the club. Exactly. Oh, you're finally here. We've been talking about this for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Welcome, scientists. Please come in.
So he comes to that.
Once again, I mean, it's pretty obvious of their stance about it. They're of the stance that, there is an intelligent design, thus Christianity is true. No, right? Sure, there's a consciousness that connects everything. Sure. That does not mean that your book is right? Sure, your book is a historical document. Sure, but there's also plenty of books that were written alongside your book that you threw out because they didn't vibe with the specific message that you were trying to formulate when you were creating the book, right? The Book of Thomas is the one that I always reach to because out of all of the other Gnostic texts and all of the books that exist outside of the Bible, the Book of Thomas is one that people tend to not be able to throw out the window, like the Book of Enoch. And it's funny, because the Book of Enoch, I see Christians all the time. Whenever I talk about some things in the Book of Enoch that contradict what the Bible, which the Bible contradicts the Bible. So, I mean, what is that anyway? But they immediately rush to, well, the Book of Enoch is pseudographia, and it wasn't actually written by Enoch. Okay, well, half of the New Testament books weren't written by the people they were named after, right? And same with the Old Testament, right? I mean, you just found a bunch of books in a thing, and you started reading the books, and you're like, okay, these align with what we believe, these don't align with what we believe. this is from this specific person, but because they don't align with what we're trying to teach, in the canon, and what our tradition says, we're going to go ahead and exclude those books, right? And we're just going to follow these books. And so this is my point, is that at the end of the day, just because you're able to show that there is a consciousness that connects everything, does not mean that consciousness is Christianity. And on top of Christianity, we'll go ahead and end the video here. I don't think they're going to say much more other than scientists, turn your hearts to Jesus. Let me
That
say.
conclusion through philosophical method.
Yes.
What Christians do.
A lot of really great stuff there. Hopefully those of you who may be watching who may not.
Okay, I think they're just going to end the video there. So, yeah, just because it's like I said, my engine's making a lot of noise. Oh, it must mean that I didn't change the oil. No, your engine's making a lot of noise, right? There's a diagnostic process that science uses, the scientific method, to figure out what the best truth is for that fit, right? And so this is very much my belief in things, is that there is a theory, there is a thinking that does fit with everything, right? Because at the end of the day, everything is circular. But my personal belief is that, the entire universe is mathematical. Mathematics is circular. You can end up in one spot, go on an entire mathematical journey to come right back to the exact same spot. I think that's exactly what's happening with the universe, is that in an atomic level, we are going through this massive mathematic journey to end up, look at bombs, right? Bombs, they go up, and then what happens? And they come back and they rush back in. And then there's these reverberations. And so the Big Bang that we witnessed at the very start of time, where we're exploding out, who's to say that we're not going to rush back together into this one and then to break out apart into a billion pieces, and then rush back together into this one and break out apart into a billion pieces? Because we know that this universe loves cycles, right? And so that's kind of my belief of everything, is that it's just, there is something. We don't know what that something is. Stop trying to say it's Christianity. It's like, I'm a technician. I repair stuff all the time, everything. I mean, HVAC, electrical, plumbing. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm an absolute master at everything. What I would say that I'm very, very proficient at is refrigeration, since that's what I've mainly focused on and mainly do. But at the end of the day, when your client walks up to you and says, hey, I have a feeling that we're just low on refrigerant, that doesn't mean that we're low on refrigerant. You're experiencing something. Your belief says that it's this. I don't know until I go in with my procedure and my process to eliminate everything, isolate systems, all sorts of things, to find out exactly what your problem is, right? Maybe your issue isn't a refrigerant. Maybe you have a restriction of some sort. Maybe you have an expansion valve problem, whatever, and it's the same with vehicle. It's the same, but that's how it is, right? Just because you see that there is some sort of connectivity and some sort of connection that exists within the universe does not mean that Christianity is true. On the same side of things, that doesn't mean that specific spiritual practices are true, or specific pagan beliefs are true, right? Buddhism is true, or Hinduism is true, or all of the other religions that exist on the planet is true, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that, right? We can look and we can see, okay, there is something there, and, we'll just look into it a little bit more and allow science to do its thing. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on everything. So let me know what you guys think. If you guys enjoyed the video, sorry it was a long one. I tend to make long form videos. I enjoyed these videos. I really do. But if you'd like to come on, please hit me up. This is my email, desertspring111@gmail.com. And we can have a chat. And I've gotten a few emails from you guys, and y'all don't want to come onto the channel, but you just send me an email about how how a video of mine has helped you, I really do appreciate those videos so much. I really do. They make me so excited and giddy to do this kind of work. You know, I was chatting with one of the people that I help about kind of the whole thing. They're in Christianity, wanting to walk away from Christianity, but they don't feel safe in walking away from Christianity, which is where I come in. And we were going through a whole bunch of stuff, and you know, I got a text message from that person the other day that it was just a really heartfelt message, and I'm like, oh, thanks. I don't get a lot of words for praise, so whenever I do get one, I like hold it near. All right, guys. I appreciate y'all so much, and we will see you in the next one. Ta-da!